Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy, Gsluke, here with our weekly live stream. This time, the first leg of the playoffs. So we'll go through what you need to know for this week's Fedex St. Jude Championship. And of course, get ready for DFS in for props. So first off, welcome on in. We've got a little bit of an easy one, little Pepsi in hand out there, ready to make some lineups. And honestly, I've got a lot of exposure in, whether it's for outrights, for props, or of course for DFS. I'm feeling myself, loving ourselves. Pretty much a major championship type of field, second, maybe third best field we get the entire year. So let's take advantage, shall we? So first off, welcome on into chat. Let me know who you're taking outright on the way in. Say hi. And yeah, just pick your favorite outright, just the guy that you're playing this week that like you have to have in a lot of your lineups. Not every lineup, right? Not your lock of the week. Hey, if you're locking somebody, I'd love to hear that too. But for me, it's definitely going to be Scotty Scheffler, right? I know throughout the week they've talked about the putter and whatnot, but it's a slam dunk pick. I'm taking him in like 40, 50% of my lineup. So we'll go with Scotty. I know it's a little boring, but we'll go with it. What's going on, Brian? What's up, Luke? Looking forward to another profitable week. You're pulling for Ricky. Cool. Okay. You got a Burns love down there too. You gotta love it. First off, welcome Brian and Brant. You'll love to see it. Paul says you're thinking it's positive for Scotty, Rory, and Rahm to be in the same group. It'll be fun to watch. I know that much. Psychology-wise, no idea, man. It might help them out. But either way, it's going to be a whole lot of fun, huh? You got Scotty. Yeah, a lot of Scotty lovers here. You got to love it. Hey, we're all in the same boat, huh? What's going on, Paul? We got Rahm and Xander. Okay. It's going to be hot and humid. That's for damn sure. You rode the sprinkling Hideki because the value for sure. So you're going Hideki? Okay. I like the value there too. I bet him obviously, but yeah, I've got a sleeping suspicion that new putter for Scotty is going to work. There's been a lot of media about it. People are, talking about the new design with the spider, and maybe they're going to try and make it a selling point. I don't know. Just seems like a little bit of a conspiracy to me, right? Just like the jailbird putter. You had that other, I think whatever the putter is that all the other guys are using, like Ann and all of them, and then of course, like the driver with Bryson. This might be the next thing, right? Jägermeister, okay. Ricky, I got you, Zachary. What's going on? You're making a lot of money with NFL too. Yeah, we'll be doing NFL as well. So look forward to that. Doesn't have a shot, but would love Cooch. Okay. Hey, we love all the hot takes here too, right? And honestly, if there's going to be an event with some crazy sort of outright winner, it's going to be this kind of event. You're saying the weather's going to win? Okay. Self-gaming with the Ricky take. I like it. Yeah, I like BDR this week too. So, all right, you can keep throwing those down in chat if you're coming in late. It's better to be late than never, of course. But let's start talking this event. So if we're going to look at last year's event, it actually played slightly easier, I would say, than most years. But that wasn't really reflected with the winning score. We've actually seen winning scores better than 15 under par before. It's that the field scoring average was a little bit better. And that was even with a cut line involved, right? So that wasn't the top 70 players. It was almost a full field event. I think it was just the top 125, right? That was cut down to the top 65 in ties. And then obviously the top, I think it was 70 moved on to the BMW Championship last year. So it's a little bit of a different format. Obviously, no cut event this time. So the scoring average probably going to be a little bit better by default, just because we do have a slightly better quality of player in this field on average, and also because of the weather coming in. So if we take a look at the forecast, first off, we bring up HRRR. It looks beautiful for tomorrow, especially for some of the late starters. But all week they've gone rain. So I'm talking Monday. They've had a little bit of sporadic rain there on Tuesday. They got a little bit of rain this morning. And then overnight, you can see, especially in the morning hours, like 2, 3 a.m., they're going to get pounded by rain. In fact, they're going to get rain from 2 up until lock, right? Until like 8 to 9 a.m. If we look at a few other models, you'll see that they have the rain coming in a little bit later. This one kind of agrees with HRRR. Medio Blue here, you can see actually has the rain going up until like 9 to 10 a.m. If you look at some of like the local weather forecasts, like the ones like you just like look up, right? Southwind weather forecast there in Memphis, you're going to get the 9, 10 a.m. weather forecast with rain. So this one seems to be the one that some of the locals are going with. And it's going to be soggy out there. There's been rain the last few days. They're going to get really heavy rain towards like 2 to 3 a.m. And a steady sprinkle up until lock. So it's probably going to be lift clean in place. Now, I say probably because you never know, right? The storms might end up missing in the area. And maybe it is like HRRR, right? Maybe the rain just does come in right around midnight, right? Up until like 2 a.m. Does clear out a little bit. Maybe they don't have to do lift clean in place, but I know the PGA Tour, right? They like to be safe, if anything, when it comes to playing conditions. And if it's going to be lift clean in place, when we get to props later on, I mean, I've already completely nuked the underdog board at this point. I think it's going to play real easy. So it's worth noting this now, though, of course, because it's going to change the kind of players I'm looking for, right? If I think it's going to play a lot easier, it's going to be a little bit more of a putting contest than it usually would be. The greens at Southwinds are tiny. When you have any sort of a miss, it's usually exacerbated because the around the green shots around Southwind are actually some of the more difficult on tour. In fact, the missed green penalty is one of the higher on tour, despite not having like any rough, right? It's like a 2.5-inch Bermuda grass, which is, it's not non-existent, but you're not talking about like a 4-inch rough that you get at like the Open or the API or that kind of test. Yet it still plays difficult because of the sloping on the green. So if it's going to play like a dartboard, that kind of gets taken away, right? Like if you're just going to be able to hit the green at all and get it to stop, it's going to play significantly easier. We know that, but it's going to take emphasis off of around the green. It's going to put emphasis on the putting ability, right? You're going to have to make a couple 20 to 25 footers to keep pace with the guys that are out there with the scorching putter this week. So, if you're somebody that is coming in with sketchy form with the putter, if you're somebody that doesn't really have that pop putter in them, right, relies on that ball striking, typically TPC Southwind might be able to, you might be able to get away with it, right? Look at last year's winner, right, Will Zalatoris. But the further back you look, right, they're, once in a decade type of winners when you get the Will Zalatorises. It's a lot more consistent putters that tend to get it done. And I think if we do get the soft conditions this time around, it lends itself, and I hate to say it, right, because I prefer the ball striking fest, but it looks a little bit like a putting contest to me. So when you're looking at the key stats, putting actually even a little bit more important in my modeling towards the end of the week as compared to what it was early in the week. And conditions in general, I do think will play easier than what you saw in 2022. Some of the early conditions tomorrow, you can see it looks a little bit gusty for at least like maybe the first hour and a half of play, but there's no real waves that we're talking about, right? They're teeing off at like 9 a.m. local time. So you can see that's where I'm hovering my mouse over here. You can see there's like 9 to 10 miles an hour of sustained winds. Those are the highest sustained winds and the highest wind gusts of the entire day right there. But then they die off real quickly. I mean, within an hour, right? So if you're looking for any sort of edge, right, maybe you avoid the first few tee times. But, those players are kind of dog shit to begin with. They're going to be extremely low owned, right? Even if you were playing somebody like, I think Hughes is going off early. I think Davis, Riley, Cam Young, right, are some of the guys going off early. It's not a lot of the chalk, right? So like, I have no issues, getting to those kind of players. Like it's going to be 3-4 holes that they're playing in like just marginally difficult conditions, right? And honestly, it might be clear by the time we get there, right? There might not be any winds at 9, 10 a.m. local time out there tomorrow. And you might just be avoiding players for no reason, right, at all. So I think that you can play the weather for Thursday pretty evenly across the board. If you're looking for a micro edge in Showdown, you could try and take some of the guys teeing off at like 10 a.m., right? Just make sure that they're avoiding that early wind, but also trying to take advantage of the pristine and receptive greens to start the day. So if you're playing Thursday Showdown, take the guys teeing off from like 10 to 11 a.m. But outside of that, I don't see a massive edge to be taken. In terms of week long, let's look at Friday. So for Friday, we're best to look at NOM. That's the most accurate model 2 days out. And for Friday, it looks like the afternoon, at least based on the NOM model here, right? Looks a little bit more windy than the morning wave. But again, there's no real waves to take here, right? So, if you're looking for any sort of edge, right, the guys on Thursday that are going to have the advantage, right, we're between like 10 to 11 a.m., right? They're going to be teeing off the last day at like 1 to 2 p.m. So really early in the round, you can see it looks pretty calm. that actually looks like it's going to help them out a little bit. But then it gets windy, right, for the last like 3-4 hours. So any advantage for week long that you might get by taking guys that tee off in like this perfect window on Thursday, I think kind of gets taken away. Now you might say, okay, well, if we just try and take the late starters tomorrow, right? Let's see what they would get there early on Friday. It looks like slightly better conditions, but kind of like Thursday, there's still like an hour or two, right, of like 9 to 10 mile an hour sustained winds, and like 3 to 4 hours of like 15 mile an hour sustained winds, right? Like 13 to 18 miles an hour is the range that they have on here. It's identical to Thursday, right? So it's like you're splitting hairs, right? You could stack maybe 10, 15% of your lineups in either direction. But outside of that, I don't think weather is going to play a huge factor for me here, especially because there's not distinct waves, right? It'd be a micro edge, if anything. You're talking about like 4 or 5 hours separating tee times to begin with. It's just not that much to work with, right? You don't have the 10 hours that we typically see for our golf slate, which is, again, I don't want to say it's going to take weather away, right? Completely make it negligible, but it kind of does. Maybe for Showdown, we'll be taking a look at it here for the next few days. Let's see what we've got down in chat. Then we're going to talk some DFS afterwards. We'll be going through some prop stuff. I know there was no fades and sleepers video, no prop video. We're going to be touching on all of that here in the live stream. So I figured with it being a little bit of an off week with the smaller field, right? There's only so many players you can talk about. We'll just keep it to the live stream. So what's going on? Jackson says Luke is the GOAT. No, that's you, Jackson. Any lean between this 2v2? So you've got Rahm and Hatton, and then you've got Scotty and Clark. So I'd be inclined to take the first one just because I definitely prefer Hatton over a Wyndham Clark. You're saying same price and combined ownership. Yeah, so if you're talking just, pretty flat metrics there, the first one for me, because I do prefer Hatton over Clark. And for me, Rahm and Scotty is, I don't want to say it's a toss-up, but it's kind of close to one. Like I really like Jon Rahm this week too. So yeah, I'd go with the first one, man. Jack says, Matty Fitz could do well this week. I agree. He's got a good record here. That is true. He's got 3 top 6 finishes, and he's inspired by his brother getting the Challenge Tour win. Okay. I didn't know about that narrative. I did know about the course history, though. And Matty Fitz, just a class player in general. And yeah, you're saying it's like the Korn Ferry Tour. It's good to know. I mean, it's hard to win any sort of pro event, so that's an accomplishment on its own. So first off, great. Maybe he'll get full-time status on the Euro Tour then. I don't know if that's part of that. Hopefully it is. It'd be pretty sweet for him. But yeah, let's get some Matty Fitz out there this week. I'm definitely playing him. You think Spieth is going to do some magic beans? We're not going to talk about Jordan Spieth this week. I feel like splitting hairs down low. Any lean between these 4 guys? Grillo, Jaeger, Poston, and Davis. So if I had to pick one of the 4, it would be Grillo. And if I had to rank them, it would go like Grillo, Poston, Jaeger, Davis. Grillo to me is the clear favorite out of those. I'm looking for approach play and putting, and Grillo's been doing exactly that. So I definitely have to make him a part of my exposure, even if he's going to be chalky. But yeah, I like all 4 of them in general, though. Or do I have anyone not named Eric Cole for the low 7Ks? So yeah, there's a few guys down there I like. So we talked Eric Cole up this week a little bit. Grillo is one of my favorites just because of the skill set fit, right? I told you about the, approach play and the putting. He's just hitting the ball well. He's putting the ball well, right? Like, what can't Emiliano Grillo do, right? You can see he's slightly gaining on approach. He's normally a lot better than that, right? Than gaining with the putter. Go to the last 36. So we zoom out a little bit. You'll see even better with the approach play and still gaining a bunch of strokes with the putter. So yeah, I'd probably go Grillo, man. He's a good pick down there if you already have Eric Cole. Do I think the rules should be changed regarding divots after what happened to Russ Henley? Yeah, I do. And it happened to Patrick Rogers a few weeks before at the Barracuda. He got absolutely shafted on his playoff hole. So yeah, I do think it should be ground under repair. No doubt about it. I mean, when I'm playing with the boys, it's always ground under repair. I mean, we don't hit off of roots and whatnot. Now, pro golf, you've got to do that, right? You've got to like hit off a root. But when it's a situation like there's just a divot out there that's messed up, should be the casual water, right? Like that's a part of the golf course wear and tear, right? People using the golf course, like that's not your fault. So yeah, I think it should be changed. And I'm sure there's even more examples that we could go from. Much respect. Keep it up. Appreciate you. Yes, sure. Absolutely will keep it up, especially during football season. We'll be doing both. It'll be fun. What's going on, Self? You said Grillo for sure. I'd go with Grillo. Fleetwood gets his first W here. That'd be good to see, but I've been told that a million times before. So I'll wait till I see it with Fleetwood. The guy is just a heartbreaker, right? I mean, he gets so close and it just gets ripped from his arms. It's unfortunate for him. Any worry for Xander's course history? Yeah, kind of, right? He has one good finish, a bunch of shitty finishes. So I don't know. I look at the one good finish and see the positive. And I guess if you want to look at the whole portfolio of finishes, it's not as good. But yeah, he kills no-cut events. It hasn't always been a no-cut event. Like last year, it wasn't, right? He finished 57th. Well, this year it is. And when he finished T6, it was a no-cut event. So I'm hoping he can tap into that magic for sure. Two very important questions. Do I have a Crown and Coke in hand? I do not. It's just a good old Pepsi today, actually. Just chilling out here. And then two, can I walk you through how you make your picks on the sheet? You subscribe today and don't have quite a good read. It's quite a nuanced process. A lot of it comes down to ownership dirty. If you want to get into the Discord, we can go through it. That would take me a whole hour to go through, right? I do whole videos on the picks that I'm getting to. It should give you a pretty good idea of my thought process, at least with those players. But with every player that I'm using, there's a use for it, right? Some of them are just chalky plays that I'm playing because I like them, right? And I was going to use them as a cornerstone play regardless, right? Like my core plays, great example of that. So, but for example, there's guys I have as a yes, right? Like in the 6K range, for example, and I'm taking like 5 to 7% of my lineups, and I'm taking for just pure upside. You've also got to consider that that's my GPP player pool. So anyone I have down as a yes is specifically for a large field contest because that's what I play. So it's more meant, that player pool, by the way, to be perspective on who I'm playing. It's not meant to be like, oh, this is who I'm playing. Play these exact same players. Like that's not the idea, right? It's more to say, okay, Luke is taking these chalky players. Maybe I tell him on those, right? You can if you'd like, right? Obviously, it's there for that reason too. But more than anything, it's why, what players is he fading, right? Obviously, I'm playing some chalk this week, but there's also, like you're mentioning, right? Probably players that I have that are modeling really well that I'm not playing, right? A lot of that's ownership based. So I'd say hop in the Discord, send me a message on there. I'll get you an invite to it. That's a long conversation to have, but a good question for sure. Am I lower on Morikawa because of the trend towards putting? For sure, Chris, and also the ownership. So I have ownership on here for every player. So worth noting, guys, everything that's blacked out is, of course, on the Patreon page. I'm including my ownership projections. Well, actually, sorry, ownership projections, of course, but they're also on here. But everything else, right, is over there on Patreon. But yeah, 17.4% on Morikawa. Seems a little steep. Hey, Luke, you're having a tough time choosing who you want between 84 to 8,800 bucks. You're saying you're mostly considering Finau and Hideki, it seems. Okay. So I like Hideki the most, just full transparency, right? Like if I had to pick one for you, it would be Hideki. But there's quite a few guys you could take. You kind of got to ask yourself, what the rest of your lineup looks like, right? If your lineup's a little chalky, then maybe you don't play a Wyndham Clark, right? Maybe even like a Tony Finau and a Matt Fitzpatrick aren't the best options for you in a chalky lineup. I like Hideki in a chalkier build because he's coming at lower ownership, right? He's giving you a little bit of leverage, a little bit better leverage, I should say, than some of the other players in that range. It's not much, right? You're talking like 4 or 5% differences in terms of ownership levels there. But if you're a little chalky at your 4 or 5 other spots, that's when, Hideki comes real handy out there. If you're already using pivots, let's say you already have a few guys that are sub 5%, and you like Wyndham Clark this week, I'll just tell you, I'm not a huge fan of Wyndham Clark this week, but if you are, you can play him, right? He's a little chalky, but if your lineup already has differentiation, already has leverage, you have no issues playing that there. So, we get a lot of questions about specific players, which I understand, right? You guys are, trying to figure out who to play. A lot of it depends on the rest of your lineup. So I'd say, yeah, if you're looking for some ownership differentiation, I love Hideki for sure. I think he fits that mold. Any chance you can move the picture up to the top left? Let me see. Maybe. I'm not sure if I can here on StreamYard. I can see, though. I might be able to do it, let's see, after. Yeah, I might be able to do it for next stream bar, not for this time. I'll do it like this so that you guys can see everything. Okay, not that. Like that? I don't know. I see what you mean. It's covering quite a bit of it, but yeah, I can't fix it right now. It says I can make a custom template, but I'm not going to do that on stream right now. I could do it for next time. Any chance Straka going one better this year? So you're saying going out there and getting the dub this time? The all-around game seems to have come around. I agree with that. And I agree with the course history looking really good. I've thought once or twice, maybe even 3 or 4 times about playing Sepp Straka this week myself, and I just couldn't get there. I just like a lot of guys around him a little bit more, but the play makes a ton of sense. So if you're debating betting Sepp Straka, bet him because I haven't. And if that's a track record out there, the guys that I want to bet that I don't almost always go out there and win. So I would say go for it. I think he's got the upside for it. I definitely thought about it like 5, 6 times, literally. Think you could go win a GPP with 6 players with 10% plus, or do you have to have like 1 or 6 with the YOLO? If they were all like 10% owned, you might get away with it, right? But if they're like 3 or 4 guys that are 25% owned, you probably want at least one low owned guy. And like, it doesn't have to be a 0.1, 0.2% owned player. It could be like 5, 6% owned, right? And get the job done. Kind of depends. But yeah, I would probably add someone in there. Go with your gut. We have seen these players all year. Trust. Yeah, like, I don't know. There's some chalk this week, but like the chalk to me, a lot of it like is based on course history. So I'll give you a few examples, right? Like Andrew Putnam. People are playing this guy because he's nearly won here a few times. So if we go down to the event history, you'll see what I'm talking about. So he finished second, like back in 2018. He finished in 5th last year. That's the only reason that he's like 3, 4, 5 times higher owned than some of the other guys around him. Like it's Andrew Putnam we're talking about, right? Like to me, that's bad chalk. Whereas like I kind of get the Lee Hodges chalk. I'm not playing it this week. Lee Hodges is chalk because he just won and he's $6,500. Like I kind of get that, right? There's the name recognition now. Obviously, he's in form. I mean, even the shots gained metrics for Lee Hodges are extremely favorable. So let's see, where's he at? Yeah, he's 6,500. I mean, it's ridiculous, the price tag. He's gaining across all 4 stat categories. I get it, right? Like it's not egregious chalk. But yeah, I would go with your gut on most plays, except for like the Andrew Putnam 10% ownership. Like I can't get behind. So, but yeah, in general, I think the chalk this week makes sense. Most of it, at least. Let's see. How can you look at the whole chart on my Patreon page? If you go on there, on my post, you can download it on the, there's like 7 different versions up there. Obviously, get the last version, and you can check it all out. Of course, Anthony, I got you. Just trying to be helpful for you. Brian says, what is my take on Ryder? Do you just think he's mispriced, worth a throw in, and low percentage? My take on Ryder is that he fits the mold that I'm looking for. He's gaining a bunch of strokes on approach, and he can gain with the flat stick. So if you're going to play him this week, I don't really want to give you my exposure there on every player in the field. But if you're going to play Sam Ryder, right, it's for upside, right? To hope that he goes out there and spikes a putter and gets into that top 10, which I think he could do for sure. Since you said your sheet is only representative of your plays, how many players are you targeting in a 150 max GPP? Every player in my pool, Dirty. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Those are the guys that I'm taking in my 150 max or GPP, right? So my poll this week, I believe, was like 28, 29 players. I believe 29 to be exact. That's what I went with, right? That doesn't mean you have to do so, right? You could put more if you want to spread out your exposure. You could take 19 players or even 15 players if you wanted to in 150 lineups. If you really wanted to condense down your player pool, it's all down to preference, risk tolerance, and the kind of play style that you want, right? If you really want to go for it, when you have a good week, when your core plays hit, if you want to go out there and have a real good chance to win, condense the player pool, right? Only play 15 to maybe 22 players. If you want to have a little bit less risk, right, maybe make more money back on average week to week, then maybe you spread out your player pool a little bit. So it depends, man. I went with 29, which I think is like, I would say is in the middle. Like it's not too aggressive. It's not too spread out. For me, that's like a very good place to live in. As in that, like, at least in like a small field, like cutoff field event like this, it's the same kind of size of pool that I do for like Showdown a lot when I'm playing in 150 lineups, is in that like 20 to 30 range, something like that. You're mixing Kuchar into some lineups. Yeah, I could see it. He fits the course. Like, it's not overpowering with the distance, and he likes Bermuda. He loves putting on it. He's really good around the green on Bermuda grass. So I could get there too, Anthony. I don't believe I have exposure right now. I'd have to, let me double check for you there. I don't want to misquote my player pool. Let's see. Do I have Old Man Cooch? I don't. So I don't have Cooch in the player pool, but yeah, a guy I definitely considered a few times. So let's go through some strategy. So we talked about a little bit of game theory to this point, but up top, I don't think you have to overthink it. So just kind of go through the ownership here in the 10 9K range. There's only a few guys that I think that are like a lot higher owned than their peers that you should watch out for. So for me, Colin Morikawa is one of them. He's like 18% owned. Also, Tommy Fleetwood, he's 16% owned. I mean, you got Jordan Spieth, who's half the ownership there, right? You've got Jason Day, who's almost 3 times lower owned than a Colin Morikawa. You've got Max Homa. I mean, even Tony Finau, right, who are 1.5, sometimes even like 1.8, 1.9 times lower owned than some of these, these chalky players here. You got to ask yourself, do you really like a Tommy Fleetwood or Morikawa? If the answer to that is yes, still play them, right? You can. Like, they're only 17% owned. To get leverage, you play them in 35 to 40% of lineups. Like, that is more than doable. It's not going to hamper your lineups, or you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket going out there and doing that. It's just that I'll just tip my hand, right? I don't like those 2 players this week. Like, I'm not doing that, right? That's just, it kind of feels uncomfortable for me. But up top, if you have your guys up here, just play them. It's the kind of week where nobody's ownership is getting out of hand. If anybody came in higher owned than 25% tomorrow morning, I would be really surprised. In fact, I'd be surprised if we have more than like 3, maybe 4 players that are 20% plus owned on the whole slate. Like, I feel like the ownership is just extremely spread out, which for only a 70-player field is very rare, right? Like, we only have 70 players to distribute ownership projections to, which means that players on average are going to be higher owned, right, in this kind of field as compared to some of the other slates. And still, right, you don't have guys that are 25, 30% projected owned. That shows you how spread out the sentiment this week is, which means if you have guys that you like I mentioned, just play them. You don't have to really think about ownership up top. Now, it doesn't mean that you can play everyone. You still have to pick your spots. In fact, let me count my player pool in the 9 and 10K range. So let me go through them. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 players priced $9,000 and above in my player pool. So of the 12 players, I should say of the 13 players, of the 11 players, I have less than half of them in my player pool, right? So clearly I'm trying to pick my spots, get my leverage where I can. And yeah, if you're playing 150 lineups, you can probably play like 5 guys up top. If you're only playing like 20 to 40 lineups, like a lot of you out there are, then that means you maybe have to pick 3 or 4 of them, right? You're going to have to condense that down even more to make that player pool work. Just things to keep in mind this week. Down here in the 8K range, I have pretty spread out exposure down here on the bottom of the 8Ks, top end of the 7s. I really like what I'm working with here. There are a lot of players that I think could easily top 10 finish and that I think are just a little bit mispriced. Seems like the community agrees on Sam Burns, Tom Kim. I wasn't really expecting them to be chalky this week, but you've got Burns at 15%. I've got Tom Kim at nearly 16% owned. Wouldn't even surprise me if he got over 16% by the time that we woke up tomorrow morning, but it's not egregious, right? Like I said, if you like somebody this week, you kind of just play them. Like, there's nobody that's that egregiously chalky that I think that you have to avoid them, right? Like, you've got Keegan Bradley at half the ownership, who, by the way, I'm playing this week. But it's not like you have to fade Tom Kim, right? Because he's twice the ownership. Like, normally we have guys here at the top end of the 7s that are, close to 20, if not above 20% ownership. And those kind of guys, borderline must fades. It's not really like that, right? Like, I don't love Henley at his ownership. Like, there are guys here like Brian Harmon, for example, that I don't love at his ownership. Corey Connor, same kind of thing. Like, he's just not my favorite play at that kind of ownership level. So I'm avoiding them. But if there's 1 or 2 of them that you're mixing into your lineups, like, that's fine. So like I said, if you just pick your guys, if you started the week, you really liked Russell Henley, then play him this week, right? He should definitely still be in your player pool. He's not that chalky. A few pieces to worry about, right? I mentioned before that Andrew Putnam, right? Like 10% down here in the 6K range. That's where I start to kind of draw the red line. Harris English is getting a little bit chalky there. Emiliano Grillo, I mentioned that he was getting steam. Same thing with JT Poston. I'm personally okay with a few of those guys, but not all of them, right? Like you shouldn't be playing every single one of these guys that is getting steamed up, right? Like you should maybe be fading 2-3 of them from your player pool and then taking 2-3 of them in your player pool. So just like I said, whichever ones are popping in your model, whatever you're using for your process, take them, right? If you're using my projections for your process, sure, you can tell them, but just know a lot of it's game theory based, right? Like, for example, like I would love to play Lucas Glover, Benny Ann, Grillo, JT Poston, Harris English, Eric Cole, Brendan Todd, Smalley, and Svenny as all of my value plays. I would love to use just those like 7 or 8 value plays in every lineup, right? Just take all the chalk down low, right? All the point per dollar value, but you can't, right? Because then all your lineups are going to be mega chalky to shit, right? Especially when up top, everyone's like 15 to 20% owned. So that's why you can't play all of them, right? You can take a few of them in moderation, but just know that's why you can't take all of the slam dunk plays down low. So you're going to have to pick your spots. You're going to have to find a few to fade. Obviously, I've done so this week and tried to identify a few fades. Already told you guys, right? Not the biggest fan of Putnam, so obviously I'm not playing him. Not the biggest fan of Russell Henley either, so I'm fading him there. Maybe it's just personal spite with Henley at this point. You guys know he burned me horribly last week doing this very same thing. And I'm also fading Lucas Glover. I'll give you that one too, who I also faded last week and it didn't work out. So you'd think maybe I'd go chasing my tail and try and play him this week. Nope, we're sticking to the process and not using them. With Glover, I just think he's due for a letdown after the win. You saw how much it affected him. He felt tired. He talked about having to play so much golf. And then now he has to go out there again after the emotional, high of going out there and winning. Don't know if that's going to be great for him, especially after like hearing that interview. I was like, okay, like this guy doesn't even want to play in the playoffs. Like he didn't want to hear that from Amanda Renner after winning the golf tournament, having to go out there again. And then, with Henley, maybe it is a spite play, but he's also the highest owned player in this range, right? So he's got that working against him. Let's see what's going on in terms of questions. We'll go through some lineup construction notes to cap off the DFS talk. In terms of weather, right? Like I said, it's not really impacting my process. There's no waves to be had out here. If you're going to play Showdown, I do like the idea of, like I said, maybe taking the guys starting from 10 to 11 a.m. So just to give you an idea of who those players are. So you got Victor Hovland. He's part of the group teeing off at 10:14. He's in a group with Keegan Bradley and Ricky Fowler. The group before that's also a featured group of pretty important guys. It's Cantlay, Tom Kim, and Straka. So like I said, Cantlay, Kim, Straka, Hovland, Bradley, Fowler, maybe targets for Showdown. You could also throw in that super group. So that would be Rahm, Scheffler, and Rory, right? They're teeing off on what I think would be the perfect conditions. So if you're going to play Showdown tomorrow, those are 9 to 12 names to keep an eye on. You could throw Hideki into the mix. You could throw Cam Davis because he's an absolute madman. Sam Ryder is teeing off in what I think is going to be that perfect tee time zone. And maybe have yourself a little Showdown bank there for Thursday. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that. Let's catch up on chat. In a single entry GPP, is it worth fading the top 3? Yeah, you're only building one lineup, so it's not crazy to go out there and fade the top end of the board. If there's a format to do it in, it probably is in a single entry. People tend to play a little bit scared when they're playing in that kind of format. Because it usually means a little bit more, right? Your single entry lineup is usually at a higher unit size compared to a lot of your GPP lineups per se, and people treat it differently, right? Just like if you're playing in a high stakes poker game, a lot of times people change their attitude, they change their strategy, their bankroll management, right? Usually changes quite a bit when they go to higher stakes. And if you're somebody who, let's say, in theory, has an unlimited bankroll and knows how to exploit those kind of situations, right? You can take advantage. So the reason why I say this, Brian, is make sure make sure you're not, make sure if you're going to do that, it's like really good to do it in like a really high stakes single entry, because if you do it in like a $2,000 entry single entry, like you're going to get unlimited leverage to the field. And a lot of top end players that have the bankrolls to sustain that kind of strategy and like actively attack that, like I do out there, know that and actively leverage that. I can tell you that much. I do all the time. I know that people won't play that way. So if you do it, you have unlimited leverage. Like literally, you know that nobody in that contest is going to have the stones to build like that. And there's a ton of value there, especially knowing deep down that you're the only one that has the stones to do it has a lot of power in that contest. Any love for Bermuda Burns? Yeah, he's a core play for me, Jackson. Love him this week. You're playing Scotty and Rom with a bunch of young bucks. Yeah, I'm going to have a bunch of lineups like that. So I'm right there with you. Smash the like button. Love you, Michael. Appreciate you. Absolutely would love you if you guys smash the like button. Just hey, helps it get it out there to more people. We can get more people in the chat. We've got 100 of you down there right now, 100 of you legends getting ready to crush it for DFS this week. Just lightly caress that like button for me. I would go a huge way. How do I feel about Power? I think he's a good high upside play. I'm not there myself, but he makes perfect sense, right? Like I slightly prefer a Tom Hoagie, let's say, over a Seamus Power there, but they check the same box, right? High birdie percentage, volatile players, both not really playing the best golf, but also not the worst, right? They're still gaining to the field in terms of their shots gained, just maybe not as prolifically, right, as a lot of their other peers in this elite field. So yeah, I like them, man. You could definitely take them for differentiation for sure. You've got a lot of them on underdog. It's a pretty good spot to get exposure to them. I like that. Kyle says winning score. I think it'll be 20 under par this year. I think it'll play a little bit easier than most. You've got the soft greens. You've got pretty much no wind for the first 3 rounds, at least as of current projections. Yeah, I would say 20 under par would be my guess. Really like Lucas Glover and his hand dog character. Yeah, he's a down-to-earth, kind of like Midwestern. I don't know if he's Southern. I feel like he's Midwestern kind of guy. Yeah. You say loves his bass fishing. He kind of seems like he'd love Bass Pro Shop for sure. What is good, peeps? What's going on, Samuel? You love Morikawa for outright. Not many are talking about him. I've seen a ton of people talk about him, Samuel, but don't let that talk you off of him. If you liked him before that, that's just fine. Has the weather edge been spoken for yet? I don't see a weather edge as of right now. So yeah, if you go back to the beginning, I do talk about the weather quite a bit. Probably about like 5 minutes in, you can catch that, but not, at least as of right now, I don't see a huge edge. Jackson says, what grouping do I think is the least owned between Scotty and Clark or Rahm and Fowler and Xander and Hatton? So the first one's definitely not it. Your answer there is one of the last two. And let me just add them up. So you got Rahm and Fowler. So I've got Rahm at 20%. I've got Fowler at like 13%. So let's call that 33%. A little bit less, right? It's like 32.6. And then the other one is Xander and Hatton, right? So I've got Xander at 16% and Hatton at 16. Yeah, so it's Xander Hatton by about like 3% or something like that, 3-4%. But yeah, that's Scotty. And then who was the other one? Clark there is the highest owned. Between Scotty and Rory, more chances for under 68.5 strokes. Yeah, I like their chances to go low. Are they at 68.5? I thought they were 67.5. Right? Aren't they 67.5 strokes? Yeah. And what are they on underdog? They're like 68. Oh, maybe you caught them before. I don't know if they were 68.5 when they just dropped or something, but let me know where you're betting that at. That's what you did. Faded the all top 4. Hey, it's a YOLO pick, especially if you're into single entry. You know other people aren't going to do it. And it's not just that. Like they're, especially like for NFL Showdown, like, in single entry, there's always like that one slam dunk value play, and they're always like 90% owned. It's unlimited leverage to be had sometimes. Do I like Wyndham? You think he's got the game for this track? I'm not a huge Wyndham guy, Jack, so not for me this week personally. Am I a fan of Svenny? He's actually a value play for me, so I did a whole video on Svenny this week. At my comp courses, he absolutely kills it. So let me actually bring that up right now. In terms of comps, he won at Sea Island. He played really well at Harbortown, made the cut, played pretty well. Last week, he finished T7 at Wyndham. He finished top 20 at the Players' Championship. And 2 years ago, he was in contention at the Honda Classic. And I believe he's even played well at the Valspar. So literally every single comp course that I'm looking at, he's made the cut at before at the very least and played decently, if not won or gotten into contention at for like three or four of them. So yeah, I really like him this week. And it just comes down to the comp courses. He's been playing okay. Like he's been like very, I would say mediocre for his standards of late, especially here for this season, but it makes sense. Like from a long-term perspective, I really like him. Do I do the Pup Cup on Underdog? Haven't yet, no. Jennifer says, one and done question. You're in second. Play Burns or Straka or Wyndham Clark? So Burns or Straka, I'd probably go Burns or Clark there. Yeah, I'd probably go with Burns. I mean, Straka, like, I don't know. If I had Burns is just a better player than Straka. Like that's the issue I have with Straka this week is that he's up there with players that are just objectively better. So if they're going to be in the same vein of ownership like you kind of have, like I'm just going to take Burns all day. Actually, I should say you faded anyone who cost 10K plus. There you go. Okay. Like I said, it's bold. It works, especially for a single entry. Where do you think the top sleeper comes from this week, salary-wise? The top sleeper, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. Like, do you mean just like the top finisher? Like the guy that breaks the slate at low price? I'm assuming that's kind of what you mean. It's probably like a top of the 6K guy. Like I could see somebody in this range, top 5ing very easily, top 10ing at the very least. So probably right around there, if that's what you mean. You're trying out the leaderboard special. Yo, the small single entries. Yeah, and if you're playing in those that's a really good way to get that leverage. Like you have a lot of, I would say, lesser experienced players in that kind of contest. It's not a bad idea for sure. Does putting contest put you off of Scotty? It doesn't, because really I don't think it's a putting contest per se, right? Like I think you're looking a little bit more of putting emphasis, but at the same time, if he's going to hit the ball to 3 to 5 feet, right, that's another way to go out there and make a bunch of birdies. And to get to minus 20, it's not like you have to go out there and gain 5 strokes putting, right? Scotty could get to 20 under par by only gaining like a stroke or 2 putting. And he's got the new putter going. So now it's not going to talk me off of like an elite tier player. That kind of narrative, right? It's more so impactful for my value plays, right? When I'm going down there and trying to take my 6K options or whatever, right? I want them to be at least in somewhat of putting form, right? Fully knowing that you're probably going to have to make putts this week. Yeah, for Scotty, I don't know if it talks me off of him. Not me personally. Yeah, Bet365 has the least accurate lines across the industry. They had Jordan Spieth, they had it plus money at 3.5 birdies, which is one of the worst prop lines that I've ever seen. He's like minus 145 on other books. I think he's even like minus 190 on a few other books to go over 4 birdies, let alone the 3.5 birdie number that they have there on Bet365. And he's plus money. So yeah, I was actually joking with a few people on Discord earlier that I would put up to $10,000 on Jordan Spieth over 3.5 birdies at plus money. And that if anyone had an ability for me to do so, that I'd be all ears to try and get that action. So yeah, they've got some interesting numbers to say the least. I don't agree. You'll say break the slate type of play. Yeah, so yeah, I'd go with somebody in that top end of the 6K range, right? I think that's probably the zone that you want to be looking at there. Speaking of that, and speaking of some lineup construction notes, let's go through that real quickly. So we're going to touch on props real quickly afterwards. But in terms of lineup construction, there's a few different ways you can be building lineups. If you're going to go studs and duds, right? I mentioned potentially using Scheffler and Rahm together. There's plenty of guys down here to use, right? This 6K range is loaded compared to most slates just because of how strong and small the field is. So you could go down here and throw in, a Nick Taylor, who I think at his price tag is an excellent play this week. You could throw in Adam Shank, right? $6,400, right? And normally these players are like $7,500. And you're getting them for next to nothing this week. And they're not really coming in at that high of ownership. So I have no issues getting to studs and duds builds. If you want to be a little bit more balanced, you can do so too. I don't really think there's going to be a ton of people building in one version or the other. Like, I think there's going to be a pretty even spread across the board. So if you find yourself building studs and duds, if you find yourself building a balanced kind of build, I'm not going to tell you to do one thing or the other. I think they're all viable this week. And I've heard a few people mentioning that they think that studs and duds is going to be the really popular approach. I've heard a lot of people talking up like the balanced approach, though, like talking about how the top end guys never win at this event, so on and so forth. And I'm just not quite as sold as some of those people are that everyone's going to spend up for the studs. Like, you've got guys like Cantlay down here. They're going to get a lot of clicks. Like, people love playing Victor Hovland. We know that. Morikawa's mega chalk, right? Fleetwood down here is mega chalk. It just feels like people are going to start clicking the balanced kind of build. So I'm not really worried about lineup construction as much this week. It kind of feels like you can take your guys and kind of move on. Down low, right? If you're taking a chalky player like Andrew Putnam, let's throw in another chalky piece in the 7K range. Let's throw Poston in there, right? Maybe up top, you've got to force in a pivot, right? So that's where maybe a Jordan Spieth comes in handy. They're at like 7-8% owned. Outside of that, lineup construction wise, if you're playing in cash, honestly, I wouldn't play cash this week. Cash for a no-cut event just feels like a complete crapshoot, and there's no weather edge, right? There's no waves to play. There's no real micro edge even to play out there if you're going after just Thursday's weather. So I would probably stay away from cash this week. Just not my favorite format, not my favorite situation for it either because of the kind of rules that we have right with the no-cut event. So I would stay away from that one. In terms of props, and if you're hopping on out of here now, best luck out there, all of you GPP bros. Go out there, take down a few contests for me, and make the community proud. Would love to see it down there. Appreciate all your support here. Hit the like button on the way out. For all of you prop bros, we're going to be doing this for the next 10, 15 minutes, so don't go anywhere. But a lot of people that just do DFS, right, and don't do the prop stuff. So I want to give them their chance to scuttle on out of here, right, if that's their thing, right, start building their lineups. Should be a fun week. We'll be doing Showdown for rounds 2 through 4, so make sure to check that out. But if you're looking for props, oh boy, do we have a lot of value over here on Underdog. These boards, they're priced like this course historically plays, right? They've got guys like half a stroke under par. You've seen scoring averages at this event close to like half a stroke under par before, which if that was going to be the case, a lot of these projections would make sense. But just a little reminder, right? Tons of rain coming in before lock. I mean, look at HRRR, right? They're calling for like a couple inches of rain there tomorrow morning, which means it's likely going to be ball in hand, right? Lift clean in place. There's next to no wind for when a majority of the field is going to be out there. And these players are going to take this place low. Last year in round 1, there was not ball in hand, but it was kind of receptive. It rained like 2 days before the golf tournament started. And the scoring average was 1.44 under par. There were winds. They were in like the 10 to 15 mile an hour range, but it still played a stroke and a half under par. Tomorrow, there's lower winds, more receptive greens, right? And the same kind of pins. It's going to play in ball in hand. It's going to play at least a stroke and a half under par tomorrow, right? So if it's going to play what I think perhaps even 2 strokes under par tomorrow, the value on both of the boards is comical, right? And I kind of went overboard on Underdog. I bet like every single player on the board in one kind of fashion, which of course I posted over there on the Patreon. But, you know, I'm taking a little bit more of a measured approach over here on Prize Picks, not trying to go overboard on it. Their board's priced a little bit more fair, I would say. They have, especially with the birdies, right? They don't have a bunch of guys at 3.5 birdies like you have over here in Underdog, which I just felt was a little bit of a mistake. Like even like Grillo here at 3.5 birdies, the average birdies at this event last year was 3.92. And like I mentioned, I think it's going to play significantly easier for round 1 than what you saw last year, which means that the field average is going to be well over 4 birdies. And if the field average is over four birdies, Emiliano Grillo should not be at 3.5, right? Like he's at least an average player for this field, especially considering I think he's a top 35 player on tour when it comes to birdie or better percentage, right? And obviously the top 35 would be the top 70 in this field. So I should say would be the top half of the 70 in this field. So there's a lot of value to be had, in my opinion, on Underdog. And I definitely went after it earlier today. Like I said, I bet $3,500 in bets over here in Underdog. To say that I have exposure would be an understatement. Look at that. Like, it got Rom at 67.5. Like, they bumped a few of them, I guess. We had Matty Fitz at 69. They moved him to 68.5. So yeah, they're starting to move some of it. So I guess the value right now would be over here in Prize Picks. If you guys want to take anything right now, my favorite two props on the board would be the Jordan Spieth and Matty Fitz unders at 69. They've already been bumped over here on Underdog. So obviously there's been a lot of action on those two props. But yeah, over on most prop sites, these two are at 68.5 strokes. I know Matty Fitz is juiced towards the over. So, you know, I guess it makes sense that they have him at 69 strokes. I think same thing with Jordan, right? He's at 68.5, but he's slightly juiced towards the over. But both of these players are playing on pristine conditions tomorrow. I think it's going to play even easier than what we've seen in the past. And the sports books aren't accounting for that, right? They're just projecting it straight up, and they've already got them at lower projections than what we have on Prize Picks. And then you add on top of that I think the course is going to play, like I said, maybe even 2 strokes under par. That's why I love these kind of props at just a 69 strokes, right? 1 under par. So I would take those two if you had to bet anything as of right now. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't look like anything's bumped over here on Prize Picks yet. So that's going to be where a lot of the value is. Obviously, Underdog has started to move some stuff, which you would kind of expect at some point. Like Hideki was at 3.5 birdies earlier. Not that much of a surprise that moved. Let's see, any birdie props move? Yeah, Cantlay was at 4 birdies. He's now at 4.5. We had Cam Davis at 3.5 birdies. Now he got moved to 4 birdies. We had Victor Hovland at 4 birdies. Now that got moved to 4.5. Like, there's a lot of movement going on here. So there's still value to be had. Like just like off the top of my head, like Sahith Theegala, 3.5 birdies. Let's throw that in over here. And let's find a pair, right? Let's give you guys, there should be at least one more strokes prop left that we can match up with them and make a slip. Let's see what we've got. Maybe not. Did they bump everything strokes-wise? I could take Siwoo Kim, though. I believe Siwoo Kim's at 69 on Prize Picks, if I had to guess. Where's good old Siwoo Kim? Yeah, look at this, right? He's at 69 strokes over here in Prize Picks. If you need to get something over here on Underdog right now, I've maxed out the entire board, so I can't even play this if I wanted to. I would probably take these two, right? You've got Sahith under the field average in terms of birdies. He's a top 35 birdie maker on the PGA Tour. And then Siwoo Kim projected what I think is going to be like a stroke and a half below the field average, which for his quality of player is ridiculous. So yeah, I would consider that. These props over here on Prize Picks make quite a bit of sense too, and you're getting some value, right? You always want to be line shopping between the two sites, and of course keeping a close eye on the weather. Which, speaking of, let's do a little double check on it. Let's see if anything's changed, and if we need to adjust. Nope, looks like no changes to the weather forecast. Again, early in the morning for the first hour of play, it does look like the winds are going to be slightly higher than they will be for the rest of the day. But you're talking about 4 or 5 holes of impact, right? It's not like they're getting their entire round done during those conditions. They're going to maybe play a third of their round, right, in slightly harder conditions. For Matty Fitz, I don't love that, right? He has a 9:26 a.m. tee time, but it doesn't make me fade him. It doesn't make me take him out of my slips. I still think he's going to be fine, be able to go out there and cover that sort of prop. It's just that players like a Jordan Spieth that can avoid those wins, I like maybe just a little bit more than their counterparts. Let's see. Any questions? No, looks like we're good to go. Alrighty, that's all we've got for the prop stuff this week. Like I mentioned, just tons of bumps across the board. So I don't want to drop a ton of props on here and then just have them all get bumped. Of course, guys, for all of my exposure, that is always posted on the Patreon page. I love giving you guys analysis, giving you slip or two out there to help you out with your process. But in order to protect the community, right, make sure that everyone can get their props in, I can only give so many props on here on the live stream. So if you have any specific prop questions, you can go ahead, comment here on the live stream, even if you're watching it on replay, and I'll try and get back to you. But with the easy conditions, a lot of unders for strokes, right? Just try and line shop the value. Try and make sure you're taking the best line value available. and you should be in a good spot. The birdie props on Prize Picks, I'll say, maybe not my favorite. I feel like they're priced pretty appropriately up there at 4 birdies. Maybe a few overs that you could consider. But when you compare their strokes props, I would definitely go in the strokes prop direction. So that's what I would say about the board over there on Prize Picks. And I guess even like green regulations, a few overs I like over there too. So if you want my full exposure, I'll be posting that over there on Patreon in a few minutes. But until then, best of luck with all of your exposure this week, whether you're playing props, DFS, whatever the case may be. And I'll see you guys for the Showdown live streams for rounds 2 through 4. We'll be talking all things Showdown for Friday through Sunday. So make sure to set a reminder, subscribe to the channel, and let's get it this weekend, boys.